Hello, everyone. We're back online finally. It's been a month, and we are pleased to have Dean Ball here today, a research fellow on AI and progress at Mercator Center, and also the author of AI focused Substack, Hyperdimensional, which I am a subscriber of. And also, we can congratulate you, Dean, on your new podcast, AI Summer, that
Thank you.
just came out.
Thank you.
And the rest is up to you. You can introduce yourself and feel free to, just make it as long or as short as you deem fit.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I'm a think tanker by training, if you could call it training. It's think tanks are basically nonprofits that comment on various aspects of public policy. Most of my work for most of my career has focused on state and local policy that doesn't have to do with technology, economic policy, public safety, public finance, things like this, infrastructure. Um, and But in the background throughout sort of really my whole life, I've been very interested in technology, have been writing code since I was a little kid, and been paying attention to the deep learning revolution really since it started. It started when I was in college, uh, and followed it then, and kind of had didn't really comment on it or anything like that. Certainly wasn't doing AI research of any kind, but paid attention, and then uh, once the policy conversation took off, I decided that it might be beneficial for me to contribute some thoughts on policy. So, after thinking about exactly what my perspective was going to be, I started my Substack in early January of 2024. So it's about a year old, and uh, basically, yeah, that's been the story. I think the funny thing is when I got into AI policy, I assumed I would be talking more about federal issues, and I do talk about federal policy. Um, but it's turned out that a lot of what I write about is still state policy, because that turns out to have been where a lot of the action is in American AI policy today. So that's
Yeah,
me.
that's very exciting. I mean, you don't just stumble into AI policy, do you? You kind of found your way to it. When
Feel
when
like I
when
said,
was that? No, I mean, like, it gradually led you to it. Yeah, you were coding since you were a kid. You were like,
sure,
you were
sure.
technology prone in the background. It's still everything kind of was leading you up to this moment. That
Yes,
particular moment, because we live in, really, dare I say it, unprecedented times.
I think so.
Because yeah, and it's really interesting. A lot to talk about. Let's jump right in. It's been quite a week, and it's only Thursday, huh?
Yeah,
In the in
right.
the US. So you want to talk a little about Monday and Tuesday news, the new AI chip restriction policy, and all the good stuff that's just been coming out of the White House a week before the inauguration, and the timing of it is just really interesting for me,
Yeah.
at least. So I just comment a few things, if you would, on that.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So the big thing there's a bunch of AI policy that we've seen in the last week or a couple days from the Biden administration. The biggest thing is probably the diffusion rule, the so-called diffusion rule, which is kind of an extension of the export controls on high-end AI compute, and also semiconductor manufacturing equipment, but this is actually mostly focused on compute. That started, President Biden started in October 2022. Um, so it's a very, very, very complicated rule. It's one of the most complicated pieces of technology policy I've ever seen. So I won't go into all the excruciating details. I wrote an essay about it for my Substack this week, today, in fact. But uh, basically, it carves up the world into three different tiers. Tier one is basically us and small handful of countries in Western and Northern Europe, some East Asian countries that we're close allies with, Taiwan, Japan, Korea.
Let's call it the friend circle.
Yeah, something like that. But it's weird because and then you have tier 3, which is like enemies circle, like China, Russia, etc. And then like tier 2 is everybody else in the world. But tier 2 includes everybody from like Portugal is in tier 2, Poland is in tier 2, Hungary. There's NATO members in tier 2.
Yeah.
And there's also like Israel, like one of America's closest allies. Most longstanding, allies, Israel is also in tier 2. Basically, the entire Middle East, in fact, is in tier 2. All of Africa, if some of Africa is in tier 3, but yeah. So it divides them up and it creates different rules. Tier 1, more or less, you're unrestricted. Tier 3, you can't get any chips, which was the status quo. Tier 2 is there's 168 pages of rules that apply to you now. And there's limits on how many GPUs you can buy. You can increase those limits if you conform to certain cybersecurity requirements and also some use-based restrictions that the US federal government sets. So you pretty much put yourself on the hook to the authority of the US federal government. And then you can get more chips, but you're still capped. And you really still can't train frontier models. It's ambiguous, really. You can run them, but basically they have to be run by companies that are based in tier 1 countries. So the only companies that are doing wide-scale AI build-out that are in tier 1, it really
already
are they're American companies. It's Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Oracle, people like that. So yeah, it's basically creating just an enormously complex web of rules and a huge projection of American power over the diffusion of advanced AI all over the world.
Yeah, I read your Substack this morning, and can I quote you?
Sure.
That's an awful lot of authority for the American government to assert with precisely no congressional input over hardware that by and large is not manufactured in the United States.
Yeah.
Which leads us to, I mean, that's not even the question of or is it of entitlement? So do Americans at this point feel so entitled to just pretty much rule the AI landscape, or at least project that they can, just by the sheer fact that all the major companies are based in the United States?
Yeah.
Or is it just...
It's funny too, because the major, certainly the major purchasers of GPUs are predominantly in the United States. The major AI companies are in the United States. The NVIDIA is a US company. The company that predominantly manufactures the GPUs, one of them is a Korean company, Samsung, and the other is a Taiwanese company, TSMC. So, they we are basically treating Taiwan and Korea as kind of vassals of the United States. I don't know what other word to use. There's a big history of this, right? America leverages the prevalence of the US dollar, of course, and control over the financial system to exercise huge amounts of economic leverage over many other people in the world. I mean, I don't know how many countries are under US sanctions, but a lot of them are under US sanction. And, we seize other countries' assets, private property in other countries. We will do many, many aggressive things. And, America's in a nationalist mood right now. So
yeah, that's an understatement, but yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's like, it's not surprising to me to see that kind of policy, coming out of any presidential administration. At the same time, I do try to think about this from the perspective of people in other parts of the world. And while I am an American, and I would like America to be, the most powerful country in the world, right? Like, I like that, right? I mean, why wouldn't I?
Yeah, it's nice to be the most powerful.
Yeah. And, we are the wealthiest country in the world, and we have the most powerful military in the world, at least for now. So, we do have a lot of ways in which we can throw our weight around. And there's a question, though. I think there's a legitimate question as to, are we going too far? In particular, I think that the one way to think about this is, like, in so many ways, the Biden diffusion rule is actually just kind of almost codifying the status quo. Because the reality was, most of the AI infrastructure that gets built in the next 5 years was going to be built on US soil anyway. Most of the companies that were going to build that infrastructure were American companies. So, we already had aggressive export controls on China. So, there's certainly reasons I can understand, for why we did this. But at the same time, we are expending an awful lot of political and diplomatic capital with countries all over the world for ultimately not that much gain. I think, because, this is a rule that says, well, guess what, Rwanda and Kenya, you only get, if you can apply, you can get 320,000 H100 equivalents between now and the end of 2027 if you apply for, special licenses from us, and if you conform to our rules. And to be honest with you, that's like billions of dollars of H100s. I'm not really sure that, like, Rwanda was going to do that in the first place. Like, again, we did a lot for to kind of preserve a status quo that I think we probably could have preserved anyway. So I definitely have substantial questions about the wisdom of this rule.
Could it probably be telling us about, like, the people within the White House, I mean, the current administration, probably they're very worried about exactly the status quo, that it's not going to be the status quo for much longer, given that China has been ramping up its technology at a very, very significant pace, and everybody's kind of been talking about it within the AI space, right? So probably the worry is just, let's proactively attack and secure everything in place, so God forbid, we'll just lose some ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a few different things that are going on in the Biden administration's calculus here. First of all, the Biden administration is, as I think the people, I wouldn't say everyone in the administration, but I think a lot of the people making this decision within the administration and informing this policy do believe in kind of that we're on a short-term trajectory to sort of transformative AI, or maybe AGI, or whatever you might call it. And so they do think that shaping the competitive and geostrategic landscape, putting your thumb on the scales, is particularly important over this next 3 to 5 year period. I think that's one thing that they would say, and I think that it's not unreasonable. It's not an unreasonable argument. The other argument would be, well, we were already denying China the GPUs, and I do think we have the right. NVIDIA GPUs they are American products made by an American company. Like, we have the American government does have the right to say to NVIDIA, like, you can't do that. They do.
Yeah, but there's the argument that China was, circumventing that anyway, and they were accessing it through cloud compute, blah, blah, blah. So probably they were thinking, like you're saying in your Substack, right? They're plugging basically old holes with the new piece of regulation based on the failed old piece of regulation. And this chain reaction just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, that's right. So there's specific concerns about data centers in Southeast Asia, specifically, I believe Malaysia has quite a large data center build out. There's a lot of talk in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. These are petrostates. Most of their money is coming from hydrocarbon revenues, oil and gas, and things like this. And they're trying to diversify their economies, and they have very, very large sovereign wealth funds and very powerful governments that they don't have to worry about environmental permitting like we do here. So they can build 10 gigawatt data centers with millions of GPUs in them. And they were eager to do that. And I think the American government was saying, well, do we really want the most powerful AI models in the world trained, even if they're made by American companies? Like, even if it's OpenAI training a model on a data center located in the UAE, do we want those models to be physically located in countries, that are not the United States? I think, and then also there were questions about whether or not those initiatives in the Gulf states also maybe had some Chinese involvement, and how like whether or not that was potentially a threat or a risk for us. So all this is about regulating that stuff. I think I read Dylan Patel had something about in his Substacks. Well, it's no longer a Substack, but his website Semi-Analysis had a little item on I think 4.3 gigawatt data center that was proposed in Brazil. 4.3 gigawatts is bigger than any data center by far that currently exists in the United States, and bigger than anything. It's bigger than any single facility that I'm aware of on the roadmap for the United States. And so again, you can see how the Biden administration got worried about that. Brazil, we don't trust them. So, that's basically how to think about it. Whether or not, you think that it's those benefits that you get from additional control are worth the costs depends a lot on how big you think the risks and the likelihood of sort of transformative AI are in the next few years. Depends on how much you trust the other countries. It depends on a lot of different things, but that was basically what the Biden administration was thinking.
Yeah. Given the timing of this, right? Doesn't it look like this cry, or just let's just plug and throw everything at it at the last second and something sticks, something's not gonna be left out, or the next administration will not roll back at least some of it?
Yeah,
and it might.
The Trump administration definitely can roll substantial amounts of this back. It's also might be politically difficult for the Trump administration to do that, because there might be the perception that the Trump admin is soft on China, so to speak, if they do. So that's a risk that undoubtedly the Trump people are weighing. I have not heard any prominent incoming Trump administration people or Trump advisors or Trump leakers or anything like that. I haven't heard any whispers on this yet. I might have just missed it, but I haven't heard anything. So I would guess that they are weighing. They're kind of seeing how people are thinking about it, trying to feel the politics out a little bit. But yeah, as a general rule, I think we're in the final week of the Biden administration, and I think it's fair to say that President Biden's administration has exercised some pretty shockingly broad projections of executive power, and that's even by the standards of American presidencies over the last 20 years, which the last 20 a misfire from AI. apologize. It must have been a computer vision thing.
This is perfect timing, actually. You're talking about the
my
executive
apologies,
order,
but
aren't you, Dean?
but I think that I think President Biden, in a wide variety of different domestic policy areas, his administration has made unilateral executive actions that are far broader than really even anything we've seen from other administrations. And basically, the history of 21st century American presidents, Bush, Obama, Trump one, and now Biden, it has been a lot of quite broad assertions of executive authority, but Biden has made many of these, and this is just yet another one. It is worth noting that everything I just described, this global regulation of AI on every country on the planet, not only is it the U.S. government doing it, it's one branch of the U.S. government, the country of checks and balances, the country that first put, sort of constitutional checks and balances into practice. Congress had no say in this. Congress has had no say. It's in effect right now for the most part, right? Like this is like it just the president can just do things like this and
It's
snap
just
the finger. That's really a lot of power. And I'd say that's the thing that concerns me the most is someone who's thinking about the structural health of American institutions. We're not supposed to have that strong of a president in this country. And so that is the thing that probably concerns me the most about this in the long term of everything.
Yeah, and it should concern everyone even more, given the upcoming administration is quite colorful, I would say, in its peak of pretty much everyone. Not naming names. But anyway, you were talking about at the beginning of our chat. The last thing I expected was the majority of the AI regulation will come from the states. So let's talk about the states, because as with privacy or law in the United States, or the absence of, one, there's no federal legislation in the books in the US, as everyone knows, and it's just a patchwork of AI bills here and there, targeting a very specific set of problems. Every state kind of just rounds up, figures out that's what we're going to tackle.
Yeah.
Usually deepfakes, political speech, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the states. Give me your most unfavorite AI bill proposed this year.
That's a good question. Well, we're early. We're only 16 days.
I'm so sorry. Not this year. Okay, apologies. Last year. I'm
last
sure
year.
Which one is gonna be? That's easy.
Last year, yeah. I see. So I think most, if any listeners are familiar with or viewers, I guess I should say, are familiar with my work, you probably expect me to say SB 1047 from California, which was the Frontier AI Safety Bill introduced by Scott Wiener, Senator Scott Wiener from California. But in fact, I think actually the bill that concerns me the most that passed last year was a bill that went under the radar, including even under mine for a while, called SB 205 in the state of Colorado. That bill passed when the governor of Colorado signed it. The governor of Colorado is a sort of centrist Democrat, often regarded as a potential presidential candidate, sort of a rising star in the Democratic Party. Jared Polis is his name. When Governor Polis signed this bill, he said, I'm worried about the complex compliance regime that the bill presents. And I really hope that in the next legislative session, by which he meant this one, the 2025 session, I really hope the legislature will amend this. It doesn't go into effect until 2026. His signing statement sounded more like a veto message than it sounded like a positive statement about the bill. And basically, this bill is a different, probably the easiest way to describe it would be sort of an algorithmic discrimination bill. Very focused on the idea that an AI system might make high stakes decisions and then discriminate in those high stakes decisions. This is something that people who were concerned about AI policy and tech policy talked quite a lot about, like 4 or 5 years ago, and more, like 7 or 8 years ago. It's not really a concern that people I know have about like ChatGPT. Like people aren't worried that ChatGPT is. People are worried about ChatGPT in a lot of different ways, but I don't know that many people who are worried that it's like discriminatory. I've never seen any evidence for that. There are benchmarks for language models, and most language models saturated the algorithmic bias benchmarks a long time ago. So I don't think there's a lot of empirical evidence for this. And the bill basically creates a huge compliance burden. It's very actually structurally similar to the AI Act, with the AI Act's risk-based approach, where it defines a bunch of industries and also sort of things you might do, like hire someone or give someone an educational opportunity. And it says that if you're making any decisions with respect to that, anytime an AI system could potentially have a material effect on the final decision, you as a business have to write a risk management plan and an algorithmic impact assessment. Basically just documents that you would pay some consultant to write, most likely. And you also can be sued. You also have legal liability to exercise reasonable care to avoid algorithmic discrimination. That's basically how it works. Oftentimes, the discrimination is based on disparate impact standards. So, in other words, what it's not saying is you shouldn't discriminate with AI. Like, I shouldn't, if I had a bunch of resumes for someone to hire in front of me, I think everybody knows, like, I shouldn't pull up ChatGPT and say, hey, ChatGPT, can you filter out all of the applicants who sound Asian? Right? Like, I bet you that, that's kind of what they do at Harvard, but I don't think that would be, I think everyone knows that that's wrong. But this isn't that, actually. This is based on disparate impact, which basically just means regardless of whether you intend,
they don't even have to intend to discriminate.
If the outcome has a disproportionately negative effect on any civil rights protected group. So that is not just race. That is age, race, gender, religion, oftentimes like source of income. It's a huge number of different things. It's, like more than a dozen different variables, genetic information. If it has a disparate impact on any of those things, then you potentially have liability. So that law was problematic in and of itself. Colorado is a pretty big state, but it's not by any means the biggest state. The problem with that law is that it has been duplicated in 8 other states. So, we now have about 1/5 of the country that is looking at this kind of a regulatory approach that places a huge amount of the burden on small and medium-sized businesses, sometimes even individuals who are just trying to use AI, in addition to the AI developers and other people in the AI value chain. So I think it's just about the worst way I've seen to regulate AI, and it also seems as though it is quite possibly what is going to happen.
You think that's just given the overwhelming number of AI bills introduced, and a lot of them actually passed? That's just your, because the conclusion is this year we'll just see even more of that.
This is going to be the year. AI policy in the United States is going to, unless Congress steps in to preempt, AI policy in the United States will be set this year. And so the question I think is going to be like, will these? I think if we see more than probably 3 states pass these algorithmic discrimination bills, states tend to copy each other, and if something worked in one state, other states will duplicate. Now, politically speaking,
Yeah, but that's the thing. We don't know if it worked technically.
They don't mean that they just mean politically. They just mean did it pass? And also,
that brings us to a different part of how kind of the politicians have been just using AI as purely this, another tool in their tool set.
That is one other important thing about all these bills is they define AI extremely broadly. So it's really the way AI is defined. It really comes down to like all modern software. Like you and I, in the course of having this conversation, there's probably AI being used, AI that would count for the purposes of this law being used in like 50 different ways, just like literally as we speak. So there's all of that. But the other thing is that, of the 9 states that are have either passed or are considering this legislative framework, 8 are Democratic states. 1 is a Republican state. So if one Republican state does it, all the Republican states will copycat. And then if we see 2 or 3, blue states do it, then the Democrats will copycat too. So yeah, and one of the problems you have on the politics is that very frequently, unlike Congress, unlike at the federal level, state governments in the U.S. are much more likely to be unified government, so much more likely to have governor and both houses of the state legislature in the same party. We have that at the federal level right now, but it's much more common to be the case at the state level, oftentimes with very big majorities. And so, in a blue state, these bills are characterized as civil rights bills. And it's very hard for Democrats to vote against something that has the word civil rights in it. It's just as a political reality. It's just difficult.
Talking about the states, so obviously I'm in New York, so I've been following all the latest and greatest updates to the New York legislation when it comes to AI. So the recently introduced bill in New York, I believe it's S 1962, New York Artificial Intelligence Consumer Protection Act. So
yeah,
it's this pretty much the same language I see. As in the Colorado AI Act, is in EU AI Act, and
all these bills are very similar. They were put together by there was a multi-state policymaker working group convened by a group called the Future of Privacy Forum, and that group all came up with the same basic framework. So the laws differ a little bit, but oftentimes you'll see they'll just word for word the same.
Yeah, but listen, people will say the goal is noble here, to protect the consumer. Companies need to be transparent. They need to be accountable. No discrimination. Well, according to the bill, it's you need to use it responsible, and obviously the yearly AI impact assessments and audits and documentation. Kind of everything pretty much makes sense to me. What concerns me is what we're talking about is how actually are they going to be enforced? Because we already had a very not very good experience with New York Local Law 144, because that was passed a few years ago.
Yeah.
And turns out the audits that companies were supposed to conduct every year, none of that language helped. So yeah, the companies did the audits, but they actually never published the results of those audits, or they published the results, but nobody actually knew where to find the results, because that was not really even the point of this all. So it's just, with all those AI bills coming up, one could say, oh, this is very good because, see, people are doing something. People are worrying about your everyday person interacting with AI, and someone else will tell you, I don't see the immediate impact. How does it really protect me as a consumer?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my take on this. I welcome guardrails on both politicians and companies and everyone under the sun. As long as everything is done responsibly, nobody's telling you do not innovate, but there's this fine line of where do you stop. But I digressed again.
Oh, well, so I think that's like, you're totally right that the goal is noble. I think the problem is when you're talking about a general purpose technology that can be used in, conceivably, I mean, I just as an individual have dozens or hundreds of different uses of just language models alone. Let's set aside AI as these bills define them. If you define it that way, I'm sure I might have the better part of 1,000 uses, some of which I don't even know about.
Well, to be clear, calculators and text predictors are included, so we can at least be safe on that front.
Right. It's like, all of this huge range of software, that I use for just an unbelievably broad range of different things. Like, we're talking about a general purpose technology, and I think you could just really drive a lot of businesses crazy with the paperwork. And also, one of the common problems with American law, there's a great book that a guy named Harvey Silverglate wrote, called 3 Felonies a Day. And the basic premise of the book is that there are so many statutes in America, so many laws, that the average American commits 3 criminal felonies every day. And some law scholars critiqued his book, and they said, "Oh, it can't be 3 a day. It's 3 a week or 3 a month." But that's still a lot of felonies to commit, right? A felony is something that you can go to jail for like 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We have a ton of statute in America, and you're basically in constant violation of something. And this, what that's turned into is kind of a sword of Damocles that can drop over people at any time. And if for political reasons or just any reason, the government decides to look into you, they can probably find something you've done wrong. Even if it's something we would all agree is kind of anodyne. And this is just kind of another one of those, right? That's how I worry this. Like, I don't actually think that the outcome of this law will be that, a Fortune 500 company has to write 2 million algorithmic impact assessments, even though they might have 2 million high-risk use cases of AI. Possible, but I have a feeling like the law will actually, like, it'll be interpreted in more reasonable ways, probably, and things will be okay. Maybe not, but probably. Instead, what it is a tool that will give to attorneys general at the state level all over the country. And it will be another tool that they have in their belt. And these people are prosecutors with a political agenda, right? Most attorneys general are elected. There it goes again. I use my hands a lot, so I trigger these AI things. I need to turn them off. But most attorneys general are elected. They have political agendas. They often want to move up to higher ranks, and they can just drop this sword of Damocles on anyone they don't like for any reason.
And most of those bills they don't have the private right of action. It's only the attorney general that can.
That's right.
Pretty much enforce it and sue whoever they deem.
That's right. It's only usually it's only the AG.
Yeah, but that's interesting because the New York one, it says the companies have to introduce this, the policy. They have to mitigate the risks, and everything needs to be in place. But they also need to provide the consumers the right to rectify, be it the information that they want to be deleted from the model, or at least there's some hint on you can have the agency to get something back what was stolen from you. And I mean, like your information, personal information and stuff like that. So I mean,
That's a weird right. I have to say, the whole like right to withdraw your information thing, I hear that. I hear people say that, and I just like don't. I've never understood it really. Like my Substack is in public on the internet, and like language models train on it. There's a button you can press in Substack to eliminate that. I don't press it. I'm fine with language models training on
it's a
my.
personal preference, Dean. Someone does not want their
But right,
name
it's a
to
personal
float
preference.
around.
I'm not sure it's a right. Right. That's the thing. The difference is like
Mhm.
right.
No, I
A
mean the
right.
personal preference to exercise that right. It's my information. It's out there freely, but if
Yeah,
I want to, I
but
can take it
but
out of
I'm
the
not sure you
system.
do in fact have that, right? Is more what I'm saying. I think that's like not like we rights are not the kind of thing that you can just make up. Right? Like you can't actually like I hear a lot. This is a very common thing in policy. People say, "Oh, like, you have a right to like Wi-Fi. You have a right to healthcare." It's like no, you don't have a right to healthcare. You don't. Like, that's not the way the world works. Like we have a series of we have negative rights primarily, right? I have the right to free speech, which means that I have the right to have my speech cannot be impeded by the government. But I don't have the right to a platform, right? I don't have the right to a Substack with several thousand subscribers. I earned that part. I have the right for the government to not shut me down. But yeah, I'm not really sure you do have a right to like have your public information on the web taken out of a language model. It's just like I don't really see that as a like actual principle that makes any sense to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, what about your favorite bill the past year? The
Favorite bill
one
the
that
last
you
year.
were really made your heart glow.
I liked the Utah AI Policy Act, which almost no one talks about, including me. I
Let's
should
talk
talk
about
about
it.
it. The Utah AI Policy Act is it I think it passed. I think it technically is in the last year. I think it's passed in 2024. I could be. It might have passed in late 23. Um, in any case, it is a it does a couple of different things. There are some transparency requirements in it on model developers, which I think are perfectly reasonable. I'm a fan of transparency. Um, there are provisions to create regulatory sandboxes, which are basically like situations where you might say, hey, look, like this set of regulations, we want to deploy AI in this setting, but this set of regulations makes it difficult for XYZ reasons because the regulations were written before AI, before anyone was thinking about AI. So um, can we relax these in these specific ways for this period of time, in kind of a trial mode. And I
Mhm.
think that's great because it allows businesses to experiment, it allows the government to experiment. It also allows the government to kind of collect data on what ways the laws might have to change to accommodate AI.
Mhm.
And then in addition to that, it also creates a provision that basically just says, if you do something with artificial intelligence, it's um, it's if you commit a crime with AI, it's still a crime, which I think is, it it's it might be obvious to you and me, but in a million different court settings, it might not be obvious. And so it's
Mhm.
good to have a statute like that very clearly on the books. And I think it's kind of surprising that of 50 states, 1,000 bills introduced, only only the people in Utah had the bright idea to just say that simple thing that feels
Mhm.
obvious, but obvious things sometimes are hard. So I'd say Utah.
Yeah,
Utah in general is one of the best run states in America.
that's also interesting. I've
Yeah.
never been there, but yeah, you are making me want to go there
It's beautiful. It's a
and see
beautiful
things for
place.
myself.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I mean, like very lots of good, good public safety, good public amenities, reasonable taxes, efficient government. Also, a lot of states have a lot of debt. Utah has a really good public finance situation. So Utah is just generally like a very responsibly man. I think our founders would be proud of Utah. That's what I would say.
Listen, I feel like I already am. So, talking about the things that are obvious but are not said out loud, the recent Gallup report about the Americans and their use of AI and how the majority of Americans use AI powered tools, but
Yeah.
a lot of them sometimes they're not even aware basically that they are using AI powered devices or apps or something like that.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? How the states, the states that are already drafting more AI legislation for this year, is there a takeaway in there? That's my kind of weird question. Because to me it was a little sobering, because we live in our own bubbles, whether we want it or not. And when you are in this bubble, you tend to think that it's just obvious. To me, it's obvious. It's to everyone. So that's how these things work, and that's definitely powered by AI. I can tell that this led to this and blah blah blah. But for the majority of the Americans, it turns out things are not like that at all. And especially it was interesting because the young people, the younger generation, they are absolutely sure that they are not responsible for the use of AI tools if something happens, right? So they basically they don't have the obligation to use these tools responsibly.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That is a great reason for that Utah, for that Utah. Yeah, because I mean, I think there's probably some people who have this intuitive idea. It was never intuitive to me, but I wouldn't be surprised if some people have a kind of feel like it's intuitive that if the AI does something wrong, well, the AI did it, not me, even if I told it to, even if I prompted it to. They'll find out the hard way, because like there's certain questions in American law where it's like, how should the law work? And then there's how does the law work? And like, I can assure you, if you use ChatGPT to do, or any other AI system to do something malicious, and it does the malicious thing and someone gets harmed as a result of that, you are responsible as the person, not OpenAI. Like almost certainly, I guarantee you.
As tempting as it is, obviously.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, I mean, maybe OpenAI has some secondary liability, but most likely it's probably the person who did it. So that's definitely mistaken. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in that report. I haven't looked at it in detail. I just kind of skimmed it, but it seems like AI is diffusing pretty well, and that's important to me, because I think that like innovation is good and everything, but actually what really changes the world and improves things is when people go out and use AI and become more productive with it and find out new things they can do that they previously couldn't do. That's to me the most exciting part about the whole thing. At the same time, something else we thought about is, and we often see things about, people don't trust AI, and that's why we need policy. We need policy to make it trustworthy. And I kind of can't believe that I don't know that the American people fall for that, but the American like elite class, like the people who like write op-eds and like set policy and go on podcasts and things, like they keep falling for this. Like they keep thinking like, oh yes, the way to make something trustworthy is the government passes a law with respect to it, and then people will think it's trustworthy because the government passed the law. And it's like, do you know what country you live in? Like, what in the last 20 years has the government done anything to make anything more trustworthy? Like truly, like by and large, like every time the government touches anything, it becomes political, and then half the country it gets a political valence, and then half the country hates it, and half the country, like the things that people trust are apolitical. People trust Amazon Prime, and it's not because the government passed a law that said Amazon has to have free delivery. People trust their iPhones, right? Like, and that's not because the government passed law. In fact, the government tried to pass laws to make iPhones less trustworthy. But So I just think don't really buy that, like that's the case for policy to make people trust AI. I think people will come to trust AI probably about as much as they should trust AI, which will change over time, and which right now, depending on the system, is either pretty good trust or pretty low trust. I think you just have to make calls, and I don't know. I think in the aggregate, people will figure that out. Okay.
I agree, but I also think that it's not only on the people, sort of like just go and figure this AI thing out, and just me as a company, for example, I'll just press on, right? Me, like as a company, I have a responsibility to make it as easy as possible for you to understand it and interact with it and find like a good use case for it. Because if I won't, what's even the point, right? Because the only thing that we are missing right now is a good use case, everyday use case for people. Yeah, obviously there are good use cases for just a niche of people like the computer scientists and stuff and researchers and people like that. But for your everyday person, apart from generating very silly images and short videos, kind of doesn't really go beyond that. But the interest from a regular person, like who is interested in this technology or could be interested in this technology, I mean, I think it has to be like it's a 50-50 thing between the potential AI user and the company, because you need to be meeting them halfway, I would say.
Totally. And sometimes probably in the early days, maybe even more than halfway. Like maybe the company needs to do, I think the companies have a huge obligation here, right? They have an obligation to make the technology understandable. And by the way, I think the companies have done a poor job at that. I think they have not done a good job. I think they have I think we are sorely lacking a Steve Jobs in this industry, because that's what Steve Jobs could do so well is he could
Explain it.
Yeah, he could explain technology. He was like a political cartoonist where he could take like very, very complicated things and he could put one slide and say just a couple sentences and he could make you understand. And I wish he was alive for this, to be totally honest with you. I really wish he was. But yeah, like I think it's the industry has in general, I think, done a rather poor job at explaining it. Like I feel I am pretty well calibrated, but also I do this for a living. So like I better be. So yeah. But I mean I talk to people all the time who are not in this field, who are like, oh, I use ChatGPT every day. And I'm like, what are you using it for? Like, I hope there's a lot of good uses for it. And I hope you're using it for those. And I hope you're not using it like a search engine and asking it like a bunch of questions that it probably doesn't know the answer to,
yeah, that's, but unfortunately they do. And my favorite example, it's already kind of old now. It was like a few years ago, the attorney that was citing a fake case with the help of ChatGPT, obviously, blah, blah, blah. But the cutest thing of all this story is the attorney actually, and it was in the case file, the transcription of the chat. And the attorney was asking ChatGPT, is this all true? Are those case sightings real? And like basically, you're not lying to me. This is all real and confirmed. And ChatGPT responded, of course, it's all true. Everything is perfect. Just use it. And the attorney's defense later on was, but I asked it. I made sure I wasn't being lied to or whatever. And it's just,
well,
really,
I think that attorney has I think that attorney shirked his or her responsibility to do a good job. I guess, like it's one of the interesting things that I kind of feel as though a lot of people look at anecdotes like that and they'll say, oh, well, this is why we need government, because we need government to like come in and like solve this. And it's like, I just don't really
No,
know.
the government won't fix that.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Common sense and critical thinking will fix that, unfortunately.
And
A lot of
people
people.
have that in varying degrees and at varying,
Yeah.
velocities.
Yeah, that's a good word to use in this context. But yeah, I agree. A lot of very very interesting cases. So we have 5 minutes, and let's quickly touch upon reasoning based models. And the O1 miracle that just came out. The announcement came out at the end of last year.
Yeah.
To everyone who doesn't know, it's basically OpenAI's a step closer to AGI, or at least that's what they think. Artificial general intelligence, Terminator, we're all gonna die, stuff like that. Beautiful. So let's just quickly talk about it. Do we even need to, as like a regular person, me just doing my job, not worrying about anything? Do I even have to worry about that or think about that? Should I be interested?
Yeah, I think so. And I think
Mhm.
basically the reason is this. The way I think you could think about the language models that we saw, still the ones that you are most likely, the average person is most likely to use. They kind of spit out the first words that came to mind, right? Like that, not exactly, but that's kind of how they worked, right? What these models do is they give the model like an internal monologue, and it thinks to itself, oftentimes for thousands of words that it writes to itself, and it kind of reasons through the problem that you've given it, and then it hopefully produces a better answer. And what we found is that the longer you run, so this takes time for it to have that monologue, might take 30 seconds, might take 60 seconds, might take 2 minutes. And I think
Mhm.
OpenAI envisions a world where maybe it's half an hour or a day.
Yeah.
And you're like, potentially those things cost a ton of money to do because, it's like the model trying to discover a new drug or something. But I think that, the innovations that could come as a result of this, of models that can truly think at a very high level, are profound. And what we've seen so far is that the rate of progress we can get from this paradigm is very rapid, because what you can do is, once you have a model that can reason about things like this, and I don't think it's limited to just coding and math. I think it's many different areas. You can have it reason for a longer period of time, and you can get the best answers that it generates, and then you can use that as the training data for your next model, and you can have that thing reason for a really long time, and it will become, and we've already seen this happen. This is the O3, OpenAI's O3 paradigm, or O3 model. That is the next generation from O1. It's called O3
Mhm.
copyright issues, funnily enough.
Yeah.
But that's like way better. It's a dramatically better model than even O1, which itself was
Mhm.
state of the art on many different things at the time that it was announced. So I think that we are probably on a quite rapid trajectory to extremely capable models. I don't know what the ceiling is. I don't have a good way to think about that, but it could be quite high. And the models could get very good, especially in the sciences, and in helping accelerate the rate of scientific and technological progress. And so I think it really could be the beginning of quite a transformative period of time here. So I would definitely pay attention.
Did you try the newest one, $200 a month?
I
One.
have yes, O1 Pro. I have. I don't have O3.
Mhm.
That's not out yet, but I do have O1 Pro. It's very good.
How did you find it?
It's great, and I'm not using it for code or math that often, but I find it to be a great kind of thought partner, brainstorm, legal reasoner, historical
That's
reasoner.
what I heard. Yeah, because everything I hear is just, it's basically very good for coding and math-based research and stuff like that. Basically for like very, very smart people in those departments. Anyone else kind of just leave it good enough alone, use your O1, and that's gonna be it. But you're saying you're using it for other applications, so that's
Yeah,
interesting.
I enjoy it. Yeah.
Mhm. Your money's worth. So okay, maybe I'm gonna. Okay, so out of this conversation, 2 takeaways. I'm definitely going to visit Utah, and I'm gonna try the pro version 100%. So, and with that, I'm gonna have to let you go
All right. Well,
because
thank you
we
so much.
are. It's been an hour, and yeah, it's been a great pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for coming on our not podcast. I repeat, our next talk will be January 30th. I'm not going to say who's going to be, but hopefully Alyssa will be able to join us. She wasn't here today, personal reasons, but yeah. Thank you so
Great.
much once again, Dean, and
Thank you.
I'll see everyone next time. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.